China just spent the better part of a decade, and by one Chinese media tally, close to 10 billion yuan, roughly $1.4 billion, chasing a battery that uses no lithium at all. That's the company that already makes more than a third of the world's batteries deciding to fund a rival to its own best product. And it isn't a lab experiment or a slide in a keynote. As of 2026, these cells are rolling off mass production lines and into real cars. So the obvious question is, why would the king of lithium spend that kind of money trying to dethrone itself? Stick around, because the answer says more about where your next car is headed than almost any headline this year. The company is CATL, Contemporary AmpereX Technology. And to understand why this matters, you have to understand how big they already are. CATL holds somewhere around 35% of the entire global battery market. When they move, the industry moves. So in April 2025, when they launched a sodium-ion brand called Naxtra and said large-scale production had already begun, people who followed this stuff sat up. Because sodium-ion isn't new. Scientists have been poking at it since the 1980s. It always lost to lithium for one stubborn reason. It couldn't hold as much energy in the same weight. For 40 years, that was the wall nobody could climb. But here's why CATL went after it anyway. And it comes down to two problems lithium can't fix on its own. The first is the ground itself. Sodium is roughly the sixth most abundant element on the planet. It is over 1,000 times more common than lithium. Sodium carbonate runs around $200 a ton. Lithium carbonate, depending on the month, can run $15,000 a ton. And lithium prices are jumpy. They doubled in the year leading into 2026, even while sitting well below their 2022 peak. If your whole industry depends on a metal that swings like that, a backup chemistry isn't a science project, it's insurance. And that brings us to the second problem, the one that actually sells these cells today, the cold. Anyone who's driven an electric vehicle through a real winter knows the range just evaporates. Lithium iron phosphate batteries, the cheap popular LFP kind, hate the cold, especially. Sodium ion shrugs it off. CATL's cells reportedly hold about 90% of their capacity at minus 40 degrees, whether you are counting in degrees Celsius or degrees Fahrenheit, because at minus 40 degrees, the two scales meet, 90% at minus 40. That alone is why these batteries have a market regardless of what lithium does. So here's where it gets interesting. What did $1.4 billion actually buy? CATL says it cracked 4 manufacturing problems that had stopped everyone before and worked through over 100 engineering challenges to get there. The headline number is energy density. Their Naxtra cell reaches about 175 watt-hours per kilogram. Now on its own, that means little. Put it in context, and it lands. That's right up against the latest LFP lithium batteries at around 205 watt-hours per kilogram, and it's the highest any sodium-ion cell has hit. The 40-year wall just got a lot shorter. CATL says that translates to roughly 500 kilometers of range, a bit over 300 miles, and a cell that can survive 10,000 charge cycles. Picture charging your car every single day. That's the better part of 30 years of cycling. But the spec that matters most isn't on the cell. It's the certification. In September 2025, CATL's sodium-ion battery passed China's new national EV safety standard, GB38031-2025, the first sodium-ion battery in the world to do it. That's the difference between a promising chemistry and a product you're legally allowed to put under a passenger seat. And the orders followed fast. By April 2026, CATL had signed the largest sodium-ion deal on record, 60 gigawatt-hours over 3 years for grid storage. That's not a press release. That's a customer betting real money. So if it's certified, cheap on raw materials, and great in the cold, is lithium actually dead? Here's the honest answer. and it's the part most videos skip. No, not even close. Lithium-ion still makes up well over 99% of batteries built today, and it isn't going anywhere. The reason is that energy density gap that never fully closed. Sodium is physically heavier per unit of energy, 3 times the atomic mass of lithium, so for the same range, you need a bigger, heavier pack. That's fine for a delivery van or a grid wall. It's a problem for a long-range performance car, and it's a deal breaker for your phone, which is why nobody's putting sodium in laptops. The IEA, the International Energy Agency, about as neutral as it gets, put it plainly in 2026. Optimized LFP lithium still wins on energy density, supply chain maturity, and cost, and sodium only takes over if lithium stays expensive or sodium's density jumps. Which is exactly why CATL didn't frame this as a funeral. They called it a dual-star strategy, sodium and lithium growing side by side, each doing what it's best at. They've even built hybrid packs that put both chemistries in one car, lithium for the long highway haul, sodium for cold weather daily driving. So the real story isn't a winner-take-all knockout. It's the end of lithium being the only option. And that's a bigger shift than it sounds, because sodium-ion isn't really aimed at your dream sports car. It's aimed at everything underneath it. Think about where it already lives. 250,000 urban delivery vans across China are running on CATL's first-generation sodium cells right now. Forklifts in freezing cold storage warehouses, 2- and 3-wheelers, and above all, grid storage, the giant battery farms that hold solar power for after sunset, where weight doesn't matter and cost is everything. Industry forecasts have China's sodium market growing from around 10 gigawatt hours in 2025 to nearly 300 gigawatt hours by the mid-2030s, with China holding 90% or more of global production. The first sodium-powered passenger car, a Chang'an CATL collaboration, was unveiled in February 2026, with more on the way through the second quarter. So this isn't a story about one miracle battery replacing another. It's a story about a country that looked at its total dependence on a single volatile metal and spent over $1 billion buying itself a second option, one that works where lithium struggles, costs less to dig out of the ground, and just earned the right to carry passengers. Lithium will still power your next long-range EV and the phone in your pocket, but the cheap car, the delivery fleet, the battery in the desert holding your town's solar power overnight, that's increasingly going to run on salt. And here's the part worth sitting with. The most valuable thing China may have bought for $1.4 billion isn't a better battery. It's the freedom to stop worrying about the price of lithium. If this kind of breakdown is what you're here for, the real engineering, not the hype, subscribe so you catch the next one. And I'm curious where you land. Is sodium-ion a genuine game changer, or just a cold weather niche? Drop it in the comments.